Which is why I suspect Rachel Reeves thought that she could get away with foisting this anti-business budget, schools making them even more elitist, our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die, energy security with Ed Zero's nut zero, £22 billion energy policies, the same size as the supposed black hole.
For the next 24 hours, I challenge you to question everything you hear about the UK's economic situation. Every time you see a headline about the 22 billion black hole, ask yourself, who benefits from this story? What evidence supports it? What's being left unsaid? By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to cut through the political noise and see the reality behind the rhetoric. Are you ready to think critically and demand real accountability from your leaders? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine this. The Labour Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is standing at the dispatch box with a worried expression on her face. Westminster and beyond will be rocked by the financial bombshell she is about to blow.
Rachel Reeves is a disaster, and Keir Starmer's leadership is shambolic, that poor Liz Truss is often blamed for. In my view, Rachel Reeves must go. The other day, I went to PMQs, that's Prime Minister's Questions, and I can see why they call it that, because it was just questions.
She presents a $22 billion deficit inherited from the Tories in a calm voice that hardly masks her worry. A cacophony of muttering and gasps fills the chamber. But wait a moment. There's something wrong with this. Disagreements begin to emerge as Reeves presents a picture of financial dread and gloom. The origins and accuracy of this enormous financial black hole are being questioned by economic specialists who are raising their eyebrows.
There were no answers. They don't ever answer a flaming question. But one thing is for sure, Rachel Reeves' disastrous anti-business budget is worse than anything.
Weeks ago, from that dispatch box, the Minister for Rural Affairs said that he'd been congratulated by a farmer over the introduction of the inheritance tax.
How did that just appear? Why now, too? To put it mildly, the timing of this revelation seems dubious. Reeves's first budget speech is an ideal opportunity to introduce Labour's economic thesis. Is it coincidence or convenience, though? The claim's credibility begins to erode as we learn more about it, much like a house of cards during a hurricane. Reputable economists have voiced their opinions, and they are devastating. They are challenging not only the figures, but also the core tenets of Labour's economic policy. According to one expert, the proposed increase in employers' national insurance could result in the loss of jobs, particularly for small enterprises that are already struggling financially.
Because just yesterday, we had 10,000 farmers on Whitehall protesting against this madcap decision.
I mean, they don't know whether they're coming or going. We are on the brink of world war, and frankly, not answering questions isn't good enough.
So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this decision should be thrown in the trash can along with Rachel from account?
The first market and public responses are coming in as the dust settles. And they're not pretty, I tell you. After having previously trusted Labour, many are now perplexed and questioning whether they were misled. The markets are twitchy because they are always quick to detect uncertainty. What's the endgame here, however, is the actual question that keeps political commentators up at night. Is this shocking revelation of $22 billion a shrewd political ploy to defend unpopular policies? Or have the Labour Party unintentionally entered a real crisis? A terrifying concern surfaces as the dust settles on Labour's budget announcement.
Of course, they didn't answer that question, so there's no point playing the non-answer. That was Lee Anderson asking Angela Rayner a question from the horse's mouth itself. They even evade questions that you would think it would be their job to answer. Now, the Labour government haven't got a clue how you or I really live.
What if the $22 billion deficit is based on false information? No matter where the money trail takes him, one tenacious journalist is prepared to risk everything to follow it. But can she find the truth before it's too late in a world where politics frequently results in the first casualty being truth? Introducing Sarah Thompson, a seasoned financial journalist renowned for her keen observation and unflinching dedication to the truth. Sarah's journalistic instincts come into full force when an unnamed source reveals shocking information regarding the Labour budget projections. She is skeptical at first, but she can't get rid of the feeling that something is wrong with this $22 billion black hole. Sarah soon discovers that this is not going to be a simple case as she continues to investigate. She is repeatedly met with resistance from government representatives who won't provide her thorough explanations of the deficit estimates.
Their Westminster bubble insulates them from the real world, and I suspect they thought that their stonking majority,
when our economic recovery is not yet established or secure, and only adds to the pressure on businesses,
enabled them to carte blanche to do whatever they wanted without our consent, things many of which they did not mention in their manifesto.
Key statistics are noticeably missing from financial reports, which appear purposefully ambiguous. Someone seems to have gone to considerable measures to hide the real state of Britain's finances. Unfazed, Sarah uses all of her investigative techniques. She looks for discrepancies in Treasury statements, Office for Budget Responsibility reports, and public expenditure evaluations. She creates a complicated web of financial ties by comparing official statements with independent analysis and historical data. As Sarah continues her inquiry, she begins to hear murmurs coming from the halls of power. Speaking on condition of anonymity, government insiders and whistleblowers present a troubling image. They raise the possibility that some budgetary data may have been falsified to give a more positive impression of the state of the government's finances. According to one source, the narrative surrounding the $22 billion black hole was purposefully crafted to support unpopular economic measures. But what really worries Sarah is a seemingly unimportant disparity in a Treasury report. A footnote that most people would overlook undermines a fundamental premise of the deficit calculations. The whole story starts to fall apart as she tugs on this thread. When Sarah eventually discovers the truth, it is explosive. It comes out that the $22 billion deficit is a cleverly fabricated delusion. Labour has greatly overstated Britain's financial difficulties through selective data presentation and clever accounting. Although still substantial, the actual deficit is far smaller than the alarming amount that the public is shown. As the public was in shock by Sarah's disclosures, seasoned political analysts detected something odd. What caused certain MPs to abruptly change their positions on economic policy? Even the most pessimistic commentators would be surprised by the response, which would reveal a network of relationships and betrayals. You might use a knife to ease tension as Keir Starmer approached the parliamentary chamber. Armed with Sarah's devastating report, opposition leaders were eager to take blood.
Which is why I suspect Rachel Reeves thought that she could get away with foisting this anti-business budget.
the decision to saddle employers and workers with the jobs tax takes money out of people's pockets.
Energy security with Ed Zero's nut zero, £22 billion energy policies, the same size as the supposed black hole.
There was an unnerving calm in place of the usual murmur of talk, interrupted only by the shuffle of papers as MPs got ready to launch their attacks. Starmer's defensive approach was immediately clear. He steered clear of direct questioning by switching to prepared talking points about Labour's dedication to fiscal restraint. However, his evasiveness just made the opponents more enraged. One Conservative MP roared, "The British people deserve answers, not spin," in a tone full of disdain. Starmer's arguments for the $22 billion figure were shown to be flimsy as the session went on. He frequently mentioned unforeseen economic challenges and inherited financial mismanagement, but he never offered any hard data to support his assertions. The more he talked, the more it sounded like a last-ditch effort to hide a huge error in judgment, or worse, a willful lie. The $22 billion figure's political objectives were becoming brutally clear. It served as a handy boogeyman to defend unpalatable expenditure cuts and tax increases. However, that tactic was backfiring spectacularly now that the truth was out. Politicians of all stripes responded with ruthlessness and speed. As expected, the Conservatives demanded that Starmer resign. However, even long-standing Labour supporters were turning away. While left-wing MPs publicly questioned the party's leadership,
energy policies which make us all poorer with the con that is carbon capture.
Despite all of their election promises to cut national insurance contributions, they're actually raising them.
Schools making them even more elitist. Our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die.
trade union officials voiced deep concern about the budget's effects on workers. Political observers began to speculate about the long-term effects on Labour's credibility as the crisis grew. One pundit on BBC News pondered, "This could be the beginning of the end for Starmer's leadership. How can voters trust a party that's willing to manipulate financial data for political gain?" Real-time political relationships were being reshaped as a result of this fiasco. While grassroots Labour members expressed their disenchantment on social media, moderate Labour MPs were observed huddled in heated debates with their Conservative colleagues. Before our very eyes, the once strong Labour coalition was breaking apart. One thing became evident as this contentious parliamentary session came to an end. The ramifications of this dispute would go well beyond a single budget. The ramifications would last for years, and the basic underpinnings of UK economic strategy were now under scrutiny.
This is why it is so worrying that at this crucial time, the Prime Minister and Chancellor concocted a new jobs tax.
And let's not forget the NI national insurance raid on the private sector that Rachel Reeves herself pointed out would destroy business.
The true victims of this lie were coming to light as politicians sparred, and they weren't the people you may have thought. Even the most seasoned economists would be shocked by the repercussions that Starmer's $22 billion assertion was about to have on British companies. Economic analysts started raising concerns about the budget dispute's potential to affect market confidence as it was coming to an end. According to reports, the private sector had contracted to its lowest level in 13 months, indicating a concerning downturn in the economy. This was now more than simply a political issue. It was a threat to the UK economy as a whole. As opposing economic estimates surfaced, the situation grew even more complicated. Numerous job cutbacks and fewer hires could result from the budget measures, according to some analysts, especially the increase in national insurance for enterprises. Particularly at risk were nearby stores and assisted living facilities, which already had extremely narrow profit margins. Others argued that despite the short-term discomfort, the government's strategy was required to solve long-term fiscal issues. A frightening possibility surfaced as experts discussed the possible long-term effects. If growth was suppressed, the UK may be on the verge of a protracted spell of economic stagnation. Reminiscent of the lost decade that other nations went through after financial crises, The prospect of years of slow development and falling living standards hung heavy. A sobering picture was presented by historical examples. The outcomes were frequently disastrous in nations where governments were criticized for their poor fiscal management. Economic downturns brought on by a decline in investor confidence created a vicious cycle of falling revenues and widening deficits. The United Kingdom now perched on a comparable precipice. As the seriousness of the crisis became apparent, focus shifted to possible economic and governmental remedies. Is it possible to limit the damage, or was it too late already? The UK's ability to recover economically, or whether it was doomed to years of financial instability, will be determined in the upcoming weeks. One message from economic experts stood out among the ambiguity. Financial reporting must be honest and transparent. If the government wanted to rebuild public confidence and sustain the economy, it had to refrain from using dishonest methods in economic forecasting. Rebuilding credibility was the first crucial step to recovery, but the road ahead would be difficult.